Everyone sees the game. The lights, the moments, the headlines, that's the part they show you. But that's not the whole story. Because behind every win, there's something else. Pressure, decisions, sacrifice, things you don't hear about, things you're not supposed to see. I started noticing it. The gaps, the questions no one was asking, the stories no one was telling. Not because they weren't there, but because no one was looking. So I did. I stopped chasing just the highlights, and I started chasing the truth. The moments in between, the voices underneath, the stories behind the sport. Because what's real isn't always what's visible. We don't want you to hear. We want you to listen. BTS. Welcome back to season 2, episode 5 of the Behind the Sports Show. My name is Giovanna. I am your host, and today's episode is a good one. I feel like I always say that, but they're always good ones. If you are looking to get into the sports agent world, or you are an athlete looking to learn about more representation, or you're just curious about the ins and outs of the sports agent and representation when it comes to athletes, this episode is for you. On top of that, Alex is just a good guy. So if you want to listen to a good conversation with a couple of people that love sports, then you're also in the right place. Before we dive into the episode, I want to start here. I have a discussion on another show that I'm on with a couple guys. It's called Pop Sports Network. It's amazing. I got involved with them and they're literally so cool. So make sure you go check that out. I do that every single Friday with them over there on Pop Sports Network. But we talked about this idea of team over country. And it came up because the World Baseball Classic is currently underway right now. And one of the guys in the podcast was talking about how a couple of his favorite baseball players are performing in this World Baseball Classic, and he'd rather them not compete and stay healthy so then he could play for his team in baseball as we're nearing opening day and coming up into the baseball season. You know, you don't want your players to get hurt, which I totally understand. But the World Baseball Classic falls into the same category as like the Olympics. And a lot of these athletes, when it comes to big team sports, hockey, basketball, baseball, these big team sports, they have athletes that perform on here. And then you kind of, as a fan, have this question of, I want them to do good, but I also can't imagine how tough it would be if they did get hurt. And it kind of came down to this one final point. Like, I always feel like as an athlete, it is an honor to represent your country. Not only from a standpoint of simply representing your country, but the inspiration that you get from other generations of athletes, from the youth and older generations, seeing y'all literally achieve greatness. I mean, the support and the narrative behind the women and the men's hockey team at the Olympics was amazing. I've talked about that. But then, double whammy, I hope y'all are paying attention. Paralympics were awesome. And the men's Paralympic hockey team also brought home gold for Team USA. So Paralympians, women's, and men's hockey all got the gold. Sorry, Canada. But enough about me yapping about all the great things that are happening in sports. Without further ado, I give you season 2, episode 5 of BTS. I'm sitting down with, honestly, a dear friend of mine. I met him pretty recently, and he works in the world of sports. He's with athletes constantly, and I think it's really good. So I want to welcome in Alex Campbell. Alex, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. We're going to dive right into what you do, why you do it, and how you do it. Just to kind of start off, Alex Campbell at surface level is a sports agent, but there's a lot of other little things and nuances kind of that go into that. So just so y'all all know, that's kind of where we're going with this episode. But Alex, let's start from the very beginning. Tell me, like, what got you jazzed up about working in sports? What got you jazzed up about becoming a sports agent? Kind of what were your beginnings?
Yeah, absolutely. So I never really thought I would actually end up being an agent in the NFL and working with athletes every day. It was always kind of a dream of mine to do this someday, but I kind of thought it was nothing more than that, just a dream. But really, I graduated undergrad and didn't know what I was going to do, so I was like, let's go to law school. Let's let's buy 3 more years before I have to go to the real world, figure out where I wanted to be. Went to law school, loved it, and I figured worst case scenario, I'll be an attorney and just work for a law firm and do that whole thing. Um, but then after about a couple of years of being an attorney and working in private practice and doing the law stuff, it was just not really my, someone says like, what's your why or anything like that. Like it just didn't, really get the juices flowing working for somebody else and doing things every day like I could, um, being a sports agent. So I said, you know what, let's just put all of our chips in the middle, let's bet on ourselves and let's go out and try to be an NFL agent. So took the test and got certified. It's about a year-long process. Most people don't know that. And I said, worst case scenario, I'll go back, work my job, be an attorney and have a good living. But obviously I passed, was able to be a certified agent. And, really basically I want to take everything that I know from being an attorney and being a lawyer and how I've advised my clients there on how to run their businesses and apply that to athletes and teach all my clients that they are a business and they are running a business and provide advice, counsel, both professionally, personally, being a first agent, and just make sure that they can focus on football and keep football being the main thing, while I handle all the other stuff and make sure that they don't have a setback in their career for something unrelated to their physical abilities and their abilities to perform. So yeah, fast forward 7 years later, and we're still rocking and rolling, and business is as good as ever, and we're still growing.
It's interesting because you kind of started out in the law field already, and I feel like that's almost a prerequisite for a lot of these sports agents nowadays. You have to kind of have a law background. Talk to me a little bit about how that's helped you and how people that are looking to become sports agents, whether it's NFL or just sports in general, how that's like necessary and how maybe sometimes it couldn't be necessary. It doesn't have to be necessary.
Yeah, so at least for the NFL and the NFL Players Association, who determines who is and isn't a certified contract advisor, which is the fancy name for saying an agent, they require you to have some sort of postgraduate degree to be able to sit for the exam. So if you want to be an NFL agent, you've got to either have like an MBA or go to law school or have a master's in something. So it just kind of makes sense naturally that most of us are, either attorneys or people that went to law school. There's a lot of MBA people that do it, a lot of others, that fit into those other categories. But it just kind of makes sense, that if you're going to be working with these guys and negotiating contracts, doing legal stuff for them, not their attorney, but their agent, the way you think like an agent is really, really similar to the way you think as a lawyer. So it kind of aligns well. I think personally, my life as a lawyer has helped the players from help my clients, not necessarily from knowing how to write a contract or knowing the law and this or that, but really, like I said before, is the counseling and the advising and explaining to them decision making processes and walking them through these steps. So when I do litigation, I'm working with CEOs of these companies that are anywhere from family owned businesses to huge corporations. And we kind of have to map out all the possible scenarios of what we do from a legal perspective. Well, I'm doing the same thing. It's just the business is Player Inc. Whoever my client is, I tell them all, you are your own business now. So treat yourself like that. You want to generate the biggest ROI you can for your shareholders because you're the biggest shareholder. Now, the only difference with that is nowadays with the NIL stuff around, which wasn't there when I first got certified, they don't really have those restrictions in place. And, anyone can be an NIL agent without having to get certified by a league. So nowadays, you don't necessarily have to be an attorney, a quote unquote sports agent if you're doing the NIL stuff. But at the end of the day, it's the same thing. You've got your client's livelihood in their hands. So you better have some sort of experience or background to be able to help advise, whether you're 18, 19, 25, anywhere from 18 to 35-year-old professional athletes, what the decisions they're making and how that's going to impact their long-term future. So I think, being a lawyer is like an invaluable addition to being able to be a good agent for my clients.
Do you feel like, and this kind of just popped into my brain after you kind of just explained how you don't necessarily have to have a law background to then kind of be this NIL agent. Do you feel like the term sports agent nowadays is a little bit overused, and like, is the job industry for sports agents a little overly saturated now because everyone's trying to like help out these athletes, whether you're a family member that's becoming a sports agent to help, your son or your daughter that's, getting these NIL deals? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I don't want to get myself in trouble here, so I got to watch what I say. But it's definitely an interesting time in the landscape right now. Like I said, it for when I got certified in 2019, it took like I said, a year to get certified by the league. They did background checks. I tell people as a joke that I used to work for the State Department in Washington D.C., and I think my background check to be an NFL agent was more thorough than my background check with the Department of State to get security clearance at that level. So there was a lot of scrutiny and a lot of things that people investigated before they said, okay, you can work with our players and advise them and represent them. Now, anyone that wants to pay $300 to their state can go start up an LLC and get a license and become an NIL agent. And there's no background checks, no screening. It's really incumbent on the players to do more homework and make sure the people that are representing them are who they say they are and hold themselves out in the light that they are. And it anyone can do it. So it's kind of, everyone uses the word wild, wild west, and like, it's kind of a cliche, but it's just the best way to describe it because anything goes and no one knows what's going on. So ultimately, if you add a pool of 10,000 more athletes or however many college athletes there are that need representation, more jobs are going to open up and there is going to be more agents populating the field. But like I said, I really think that players have to do more work on the front end to make sure that whoever they're trusting with their livelihood has their best interest in mind, one, and is competent to do the job and has experience and knowledge to adequately represent them and not give them a bad reputation that could ruin their career before it even starts.
Right, right. That makes sense, and I don't wanna get you in trouble either, but it's always been kind of a curiosity of mine that I've had when I see all these agents, and, like, I meet them too, and I'm like, "Okay, this is." I feel like, to your point, I mean, you said you got certified back in 2019. From then until now, there's been kind of a boom in the industry, and yes, it's because more athletes need, help and representation and things like that, but it kind of begs the question of, are these people really qualified to do what they do? But speaking of NIL, obviously at the surface level, like, there's clear differences that I even know from, the time that you started in this industry until now. But walk me through some of the things that you've seen personally, in terms of the shift for better and for worse when it comes to name, image, and likeness, and how that's been in navigating with, these athletes.
Yeah, I mean, it's really been crazy. It's kind of taken on multiple different phases from 2021 when NIL first became, legal to what it is now, and the rev share aspects of it, and the actual like pay for play that essentially you get from these schools. Um, you know, People say NIL has been going on since before 2021. It was just now we hand the money over the table than under the table. I won't comment on that, but it's been a ton of different things. It's at the end of the day, I would say that the players in the NIL space are competitors and they want to win. And so they're going to do whatever they can. They're going to get as creative as they need to to give their team, give their school the most competitive advantage in the marketplace, and do whatever they can to get the best players to win. And then, if you're in sports, well, if you're not trying to win, what are you doing here? You know what I mean? So it's not a problem, but it's something that we need to address just to make sure that everyone knows what the rules are, so that one school or player isn't doing one thing and another school and player is doing something else, or they're doing the same thing and one gets punished and one doesn't. I think clarity is what everyone's looking for. But when it first got started, it was truly like endorsement deals. Let players monetize. Like, Johnny Manziel is kind of the staple of it all. He's like the poster child, and it's ridiculous that he was getting in trouble for like paying, getting money for signing autographs. Like, what does the school have to do with Johnny Manziel signing autographs? Or if people are buying his jerseys at the pro shop at A&M, why should he not get some compensation for it? They're not buying just blank A&M jerseys. They're buying it because they want Johnny's jersey. So I think, at its heart, it's a really good thing. And if players are able to make money off of themselves, off of their personality, they should be able to do it. The problem is once every good thing, every good natured thing gets twisted, and NIL turned into pay for play, basically, but it was a wool in sheep's clothing. The started having these companies that were using the players' NIL to, and getting and paying them for it. And whether or not, if a kid should be entitled to $100,000 for making one social media post about his school's collect, how can you say that business made a good decision? Now, personally, it puts money in my players' pockets, so I'm not complaining about it. But from a market standpoint, did that post really drive $100,000 worth of revenue, or were you just trying to check the box so that this was legal NIL pay for play? And then, like I said, now you've got the whole rev share component of it, where schools are able to actually pay players out of their budget to come play at their schools. And then, who knows what the next thing is going to happen here from now. I mean, they're going to find some new loophole, some new advantage. They're going to put a salary cap in and then change things around. One thing that's really interesting that we're seeing these days is that schools are essentially trying to source NIL deals for the players, kind of being the agent, the NIL agent for the athlete, saying, hey, come to our school and we'll get you a deal with this company so that they can pay you, so that we don't have to pay you, and it saves money and out of our pocket. Which, is good and bad for an agent, because one, it gets our player revenue, and we're looking out for our athletes and making sure that they're taken care of. But two, some, I don't know how to phrase this, but if the school brings you a Coca-Cola deal while the agent's been in the background negotiating something with Pepsi, your hands are kind of tied, and then you got to take the Coca-Cola deal, potentially, depending on how your contract's written with the school. And then the agent still has to go review and negotiate the contract, even though they're not really getting any benefit out of it. So it's a good thing for the players. It's a good thing for the schools. We just need to figure out a system that makes sense for everybody involved. But who knows what's going to be next? I have no idea what's going to happen next. But until we get like a clear set of playing rules, do whatever you have to do to win, I guess.
That brings up kind of a thought in terms of, do you think schools are going to start hiring their own in-house, and maybe this is already a thing, but do you think they're going to have their own in-house agents that they can then go assign, kind of like when you go to school and when you're like football, for instance, each football player has a counselor, an academic counselor assigned to them that's separate from the school, the university's academic counselors. It's only for football, only for athletics. Do you think they're going to start doing that with agents to kind of assist in that process? Obviously, it's kind of still cutting you out, because if you have an agent before you kind of walk into that new contract with that school, then it's like, okay, but at least the school is kind of then covering a basis of like, hey, we actually do have resources and we are going to provide people, for you to use at your time here.
Yeah, I think the University of Texas is a great example of that, because I'm pretty sure that's kind of what they're doing already. They have basically an in-house UT agency that goes and tries and gets deals for University of Texas football players, athletes, student athletes of all kind. So they're kind of already on the forefront of doing that. And again, for the school, it's great. It's a recruiting tool because it helps get players come commit there if someone's going to do all the work for them. That being said, the school is going to have the school's best interest in mind. So even, that's like saying that your NFL team, you're going to the pros, you're playing for an NFL team, and the NFL club is going to assign you an agent to negotiate their contract with the team. Like, are they really going to have your best interest in mind, or are they going to have the school's best interest in mind? And, let's go back to the Coca-Cola Pepsi example. Let's say the University of Texas has a contract, Coca-Cola is the official soft drink of the Texas Longhorns. Well, it benefits them dramatically to have more of their players do endorsement deals with the school. And, maybe they've got 5 guys working together. They get 5 football players to all do a co-branded commercial for Coca-Cola representing the University of Texas. But the deal that I was negotiating with Pepsi probably would have gotten my player twice as much money, or could have gotten my player twice as much money. So at the end of the day, while they're doing that, and it's a great opportunity and helps bring in opportunities for the players, I'm always just reluctant to make sure, like, who are they looking out for? Are they looking out for the school, or are they looking out for the player? And that's where, and your own independent advisor, agent, consultant, whoever it may be, is still a necessary piece and adds value to make sure you're being protected as the player.
Yeah, we've sort of kind of dove deep and talked about the pros and the cons about NIL and the state of collegiate athletics, as it is from a money and a business perspective, especially for these universities. But is there one thing, like if you could change something in the NIL rule book right now, is there one thing you could confidently say right now that should be changed?
What rule book?
Good point. Good point.
No, I mean, there's not one thing that needs to be changed. There's different, and it really depends on who you are and what stakeholder who you have skin in the game for. As as a player representative and as someone looking out for the players, I think right now the system is great because we have a lot of latitude to do what we want. The one thing I'll say, just as on a macro perspective of working with athletes, is that just because they have the most opportunities right now to make money doesn't mean that the athletes are the most protected right now. And this goes to, you've got to think about the SEC Power Four, dominant schools that have funding, resources, all of that. But then you also have to take into account the smaller schools, the Group of Fives, the Division Twos, who may or may not be getting NIL money, but they don't have the same sort of resources. So who's protecting the players? And what I mean by that is, are we making sure that they understand, right now everything you do is independent contractor work. So are the players really understanding that taxes are not being taken out of their income? Are they saving for taxes? What are they doing with the money? Where is that going? Despite the fact that NIL's here, it doesn't change the fact that, only 2% of anyone that plays college football is going to go play professional football. So if 98% of the athletes that are earning NIL money, that's the only money that they're going to get from playing their sport, are they doing an adequate job of either saving or budgeting or spending correctly? Like that's my thing at the end of the day. I'd hate to see a guy that makes $500,000 playing college football graduate, get out of school, not make it to the league, and not have a nickel to show for it. And where he could have been a 22, 23-year-old with a huge head start on anyone else that's graduating from school from a financial standpoint. We just need to make sure that there's systems in place to make sure to not let them lose that head start opportunity that they had a chance to get.
Yeah, and I feel like it kind of comes down to the families, and if you do have good representation and a good agent to be able to educate you on those things and to navigate those waters. The last thing I want to touch on when it comes to the NIL conversation, and I don't know if you would agree with this, but outside of NIL actually benefiting and actually paying players in ways that they should be played. In my opinion, there is this culture shift that we're seeing in collegiate athletics that is starting to bleed over into the pros, whether that's NBA, NFL, hockey, whatever. There is sort of this culture shift in terms of players putting the money and the contract and things like that first, which, you know, if you're good enough, there's an argument for that. But is NIL in the world that collegiate athletics is when it comes to this money-driven business first model now in turn kind of hindering athletes and making them think a little bit differently and not think about the sport that they love to play and always viewing it as a business and then kind of diva is going a little bit far when I want to explain this, but turning some of these people's into divas.
I I really don't think so. I think that might be a little overblown in the communities today. What I'll say is money doesn't what's the old phrase? Money doesn't build care. Money doesn't change a person's character. It reveals like that. It's one of those things where I think it's a great um, framework we have now because it's really a dress rehearsal for what it's going to be like when you go pro. You get to understand how these things work. These are the same decisions the pros have to make. You're just getting a chance to make them a couple years earlier. And it's not like there's people that were I think to use the term diva. Um, to You don't like turn into a diva, in my opinion. That's who you were. It's just you're getting the opportunity to show your true colors earlier than you might have anticipated. So it's not that these players that are just chasing the money weren't going to be chasing the money before. It's just they didn't have the opportunity to do it. And again, like I said, if this is the only chance you're going to have making money playing the sport, then you should try to make as much money as you can doing it. If you're doing, I've met just as many players that didn't want to enter the transfer portal and leave to go somewhere else where they might have had a bigger chance to play or might have had a chance to make more money, but wanted to stay loyal to their school and the school that took a chance on in the first place. I've had so many people say that to me and say, no, this is my school. These guys took a chance on me. I love this community. I want to stick around. So it's not like the money is corrupting them or NIL is corrupting players. It's just, like I said, a dress rehearsal for what it's going to be like when you go pro. And, the same thing, we just went through the main week of free agency last week in the NFL. That's what happens in the NFL. Like, if you have a great year and you have a market value and you're up for a big contract, you've got to realize the reality of the situation is you're probably not going to be on the same team that you were the year before. And if you are, it's because you're taking a pay cut. And if you want to take a pay cut because you believe in what they're building and you like your hometown and you don't want to move, you're more than welcome to do that. But if simultaneously, no one's going to fault you for saying, hey, this is my last chance at a big contract. I've got to, earn as much as I can because NFL stands for not for long. And, I don't know, how much money I'm going to be able to make doing this for my career. Then can we really fault somebody for taking a better job? Like, if you're an accountant and you're going to work at, Ernst and Young or something like that, and then KPMG says, hey, we'll offer you double what you're making at Ernst and Young because we see value in you and we can, vision like you growing here better. Who's going to blame the accountant for leaving their job to go take double what they're making at the other place? Like, that's, it's the world we live in. It's doing what's best for you, looking out for your interests. So I really don't think that it's a scenario. Now, again, there's exceptions to every situation and every rule. So I'm not saying that every person is perfect in the NIL landscape. And there are some players that are maybe in it for the wrong reason, but that's just going to happen regardless. And there's, I don't know if there's anything you can really do about it, but if I'm an NFL scout and I'm seeing that, then I say, okay, well, we know what kind of player that is, and that goes down the road. That comes into consideration when they're doing their draft work and draft analysis and their scouting reports. But that's why, again, you need good representation to sit there and tell you, hey, man, if you transfer, you're going to be going to 4 schools in 4 years. Teams are going to see that and think it's a red flag. And, that might bump you from being a 2nd round pick to a 4th or 5th round pick because they view you as a flight risk or see this or this. When you get to the NFL, it's so nitpicky on what they do to differentiate the players. Like, pick 1 and pick 252, like, the disparity between the caliber of the player is so nominal that they're looking for every little thing to make the difference on why to pick this guy over this guy, and so on and so forth. So at the end of the day, like, that's, you need somebody in your corner that can explain that stuff to you, walk you through it. And if you still want to transfer and go to 4 schools in 4 years, that's your prerogative. But it's not like they were doing that. They wouldn't have done that beforehand. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, and I really like that perspective. I also like that you said that NFL stands for not for long. I've never heard of that. That's a good one. But honestly, it's kind of refreshing to hear. And as you were talking, I immediately thought of like Nico Maliava and that whole situation and how they really, and when I say they, the media really spins it and makes it look like this kid and their family are money hungry. But when you kind of put it like you just put it, it's like you're looking out for yourself, and a lot of these players are looking out for their families. A lot of these players have never even seen the kind of money that they're making and seeing the kind of money their families haven't seen that kind of money. So I think it's really special, that you are able to do your big one if you can when you're at that level. And like you said, I don't, no one should necessarily fault them. Now, if you're being a complete like jerkwad, then okay, that's a different scenario and different case. Like you kind of said, there's exceptions, but I never heard that put, and I actually really like that, and I think more people should kind of adopt that mindset when we're talking about these athletes and stuff like that. But I want to put the NIL conversation to bed a little bit because we spent a little bit, talking about that, and I want to get into your agency, your types of clients, and I want to start with when an athlete comes to you, what are the first types of things that you're doing? And is it like a two-way relationship? So are you accepting every single athlete that you get? Or is it kind of like, okay, is this right fit for our agency? Can we really help you? Is it a two-way street?
Yeah. So it's kind of cheesy, but like, I basically run the agency along the same principles that I learned like playing sports growing up. And like, I use a bunch of the coach cliches that you hear about when you're like playing sports as a kid. I played football in high school, wasn't good enough to go to college, played college. So, I'm not like the high level NFL caliber athlete. So a bunch of these cliches are stuff that you hear from high school football and stuff like that. But I always say like, we really emphasize culture over at Ajax and making sure that whether it's interns that we're hiring, agents that we're hiring, players that we're bringing on to sign, that they all match the culture that we fit into. And so I say, OKG, our kind of guy. Like, you got to be our kind of guy to be an Ajax client. And what I tell everyone is that there's a trust. Trust is the number one aspect of any agent client relationship, in my opinion, but it's a two-way street. The player doesn't have to just trust the agent has to be able to trust the player. And if I can't trust a player, if I think that a potential client isn't going to be forthright and forthcoming with me and always tell me all the facts, then I don't know if it's the best fit. And I'm gonna probably have to say, like, I think it's best you go find someone else to represent you. Similarly, I don't want a client. I don't care how bad I want to sign the client. I tell them every time when we're talking and going through these discussions, if you don't trust me and you don't think you can trust me to do what's best for you and put your best interest in, I'd hate to see that happen. And I don't know what I gave you the reason to not trust me, but don't sign with me. Like, sign with the agent that you're talking to that you trust the most and you feel the most comfortable with. Um, because I can't do a good job if my clients don't trust me. It just doesn't work that way. Um, a lot of times what my clients will say is, Alex, what would you do if you're in my shoes? Like, what would you do if you were in my situation? Because one thing I don't do is make decisions for my clients. I tell all of them, I'm going to give you all of the inputs. It's your job to take those inputs and turn it into an output. I will say, hey, this is risky, or I don't think you should do this because there's this issue, this issue, this issue. But at the end of the day, if they want to make that decision because those three bad things are not worth the same as like the one thing that's good is worth those three risks, then that's their decision. That's a prerogative to make. But they know that I'm giving them all of the inputs at the front and warning them of the pros and cons of every opportunity. And if you don't trust me to do that, then why are we working together? So culture and trust are two of the biggest foundations of how we sign our new clients, and who we're looking for is someone that we're going to represent down the road. We want to trust them and we want them to trust us.
So the signing process, are you taking these, having a conversation over lunch, coffee, and then, those a couple phone call conversations, maybe a Zoom meeting, and then, like sign the contract? Is that kind of how it typically goes? And then if after they sign the contract, what are the next steps in which that your agency and your team kind of comes in and helps them get those deals, land those deals, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, so the other thing that I like to say that our agency does that I don't know if everyone else does. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But we really don't have a cookie cutter approach. We treat all of our clients individually and work to whatever their strengths and weaknesses are, and deal with their skill sets or their situations very differently. So it's not a one size fits all approach to player representation, in my opinion. That being said, so we reach out, we start talking with potential clients, prospective clients. COVID kind of actually helped things out a little bit because beforehand you'd have to like drive to the stadium and watch them play, and then kind of hang outside after the game and see if you could flag them down. Things are way more digital now, so it's a lot easier to talk to players, where if I'm talking to somebody from California or the West Coast, I don't necessarily have to fly out and go meet their families. We can do Zoom calls or this or that. That being said, the first client I signed in the NFL, I'm trying to remember, but basically I got connected to his dad. And I don't remember how that came about, but we had a brief phone call, and then we had a more in-depth phone call. And I took that phone call driving back from a funeral up in Iowa. And I'm just driving in the middle of nowhere, talking to him, kind of letting him get to know me a little bit. It was like a 45-minute phone call. And the next step was, okay, well, I want to meet you face to face before we move forward. And he was playing football down in Houston. So I drove from Dallas to Houston. I think I left at like 7 a.m, drove down to Houston, had lunch with him, just got to know each other. And again, it's kind of a combination of talking business, but also getting to know the players and getting to know who they are, what they're about, what they like, what they don't like, friendships and stuff like that, building a relationship outside of just the business side of things. So it's, the one thing you don't want to do is sign somebody, like you go to their profile on their school's website and the roster, and it says like, oh yeah, 6'5", 285 pounds. And then you sign him and then meet him for the first time after you signed him. And it's like, oh wait, you're 6 foot, 180 pounds. Like
Something's not right here.
So yeah, so it's everybody, but it's really just kind of all about, I jokingly kind of say it's kind of like dating. You get to know them a little bit, you have some friendly conversations, maybe you start out with some texts and Instagram, whatever, and then slowly move into phone calls and then in person, and slowly just kind of, again, building relationships, because that's how you build the trust and build those foundations. And then once we feel comfortable that I'm going to do the best job for them that I can, and they believe that, we sign up together, and at that point, on the NFL side of things, we get them signed up and then start getting them ready for the draft. Got a 4-month window from January to April to have a 4-month long job interview. And so my job is to not only market them to NFL teams and get them, exposure at the highest level with all 32 front offices, but also prepare them and prepare them physically, getting them trained and ready for pro days, um, interview prep work to understand like how to answer questions when people are talking to you, understanding the mental side of things, the transition from college to pros, walking through and just being a resource for them as much as you can because like I said, it's a 4-month job interview for the biggest job of your life. And so I don't think you can really be over prepared for something like that.
At all. Yeah. When you it's really interesting. So do you is there a right time to get representation for these athletes? I mean, obviously, kind of what you just said, like those 4 months, opening up until, the biggest interview of your life if you're going to the pros from the NFL perspective, but are you getting representation when you're, high school, about to go to college? Are you getting representation, prior to signing day as a high school student? That way you can have an agent in college. Is there a right or wrong way? Or kind of what you said earlier, is it very much based on your situation? Kind of,
Yeah, well, I mean, we're kind of touching on a little two different points there because as a college student athlete, you cannot have a pro agent representing you. And so, you cannot have an NFL agent while you're in college. But if you're going to have an NIL agent representing you throughout your collegiate career, then yeah, you want to get that early on before. I mean, the worst thing you can do is sign a deal and then hire an agent and say, here's this deal. Like my hands are kind of tied. You've already agreed to all this stuff. If you had talked to me beforehand, I could have done this, could have done this. And then, the other thing is that like on the college, high school level, like all 50 states are different. So all 50 states have different laws when you can and can't get an agent, whether, in Texas, high school players really can't earn NIL money right now. Based on the laws that we have at hand. So what's an agent going to do for you in high school? But again, you don't want to sign a contract to commit to play and get all this money to pay for doing something without having some sort of counsel review it and look it over and confirm it's compliant and in your best interest. So you really, like I said, you can't have an NFL agent until you're done playing college football. But if you're going to do the NIL stuff and you need an NIL representative, you really need someone to assign you before you agree to anything.
what is the biggest misconception do you feel like when it comes to representation right now? And this could be like maybe from a parent perspective, like some parents that are, looking to get, their child representation, but they might have the wrong way of going about it or the wrong way of thinking.
I think one big misrepresentation or misunderstanding, I should say, um, an agent doesn't get you drafted. An agent is not going to take some guy that's under the radar, off the grid, nowhere. And then just because you can sign with the best agent in the world that has, hundreds of clients, and that's not going to suddenly make him become a first round pick. Um, at the end of the day, especially when you're dealing with rookies and coming into the draft at the outset, um, the agent's going to protect you and like I said, kind of jockey for you. And no, like they do a good job of we do help you, but if you're not if you're not a draftable player, having an agent isn't going to make you a draftable player. And I think a lot of times friends, family members, parents, they get misinformed by the media and they might see Mel Kiper posting his mock draft and saying, oh, my son's a third round pick, like he's going to be a third round pick, and then you don't get drafted till the 6th round, and it's like, well, Mel Kiper doesn't work for any of the 32 teams, and the 32 teams did not think you were a third round pick. They thought you were a 6th round pick. So it's kind of dealing with those the expectation management side of things and being straightforward and you know, as long as you're honest with your client, with their family from the outset, you really don't have these issues. But if you're an agent sitting there telling you, "Oh, I'm going to get you drafted," or "Sign with me, and I'll make sure and guarantee to get you drafted," or "Get you drafted by this round or that round," those I think are the biggest misconceptions, misunderstandings about the process as a whole and what an agent does. You know, I'm going to get you the best deal I can, and I will get you a better deal than what you would have gotten if you weren't represented. But that doesn't change. That doesn't make you go from being nobody to being no pick.
If you're Mr. Irrelevant, you're Mr. Irrelevant. Um, the combine.
Mm-hmm.
Over the years, me personally, I feel like there is a let me just ask, how crucial is the combine nowadays to getting drafted to you? Because I mean, you put the combine up against the years that you've played in college, whether that's 4 or however long you played. Is there like a measuring stick, I guess, like in terms of how crucial and is the combine or make or break for your draft stock and things like that? Because there's interviews, there's the workouts, all that kind of stuff. But half of these big time players don't even participate. So how crucial is it for players, or is it more of a like, if you want to lift your draft stock, then yeah, go in the combine and perform and go crazy. But if you're okay with where you are, then you can bypass it.
Yeah. So this again is different for everybody and depends on your situation. Here's the little known fact about the combine, um, or the secret value in it that most people don't realize is when you're playing in the NFL, when you're about to get drafted, one of the most important things to a team's evaluation is your health. Um, you don't go buy a car at the dealership without looking under the hood, right? You don't want to buy something just because it looks shiny and flashy, and then you drive it off the lot, and next thing you know, the muffler's bad, the filter's dirty. There's all these like things going wrong with the car, but they waxed it, polished it, and washed it real nice, so it looked really good on the lot. But you didn't get a chance to really inspect it, investigate it. That's really the combine's biggest value add, is that if you get invited to the combine and you go attend, you get all your medical reports go to all 32 teams. And a team is not going to draft you unless they have medical eval on you. They just won't do it. It's not worth the risk. So what people think that the combine is there for the 40s and the bench and this, it's really there for the medicals. That is the most important part about going to the combine. Otherwise, it's really hard for a team to get your medical evals, do your medical like physicals and all of that stuff, and it really limits your abilities. Now, taking the medical aside and focusing on what they show you at, on the TV, on NFL Network, and all of that stuff. Um, most of the time, the combine, in my personal opinion, is a way to knock a player down, not bump a player up. That's why you see guys like if you're Mendoza this year in this year's draft, like you're projected number one overall. You're probably going to go number one overall. The only thing you can't go higher than that. So like why would you go out there and compete in the combine if the only thing it can do is give a team ammunition to not take you number one overall? Same thing. So those top 5 picks or so, if you're kind of set in stone with where you're at and where you're going, then the only thing going to the combine can do is hurt you, not help you. Now, if you're at a smaller school or maybe a little lesser known, kind of off the map, um, and they haven't seen you kind of play with big level competition, then the combine is a great way to kind of get yourself known, get yourself out there. And if you're going to not one of these Power 4 schools and you're not like being circulated as one of these well-known names, go run your ass off on the 40, kill it, have a great time. And then people are going to say, oh, well, yeah, we need to draft this guy. We need to look at this guy, take another look at his film, evaluate him, do some more homework. So it's really a chance. I mean, you can have a chance to stand out. And when you do that, then teams might take a deeper look at you, do some more homework, some more evaluation. So if you're on the lower end of that draft board, then absolutely go to the combine and do something to raise your stock. If you're up on the high end, then the only place you can go is down. So it really depends on what your situation is, on how much the combine can help or hurt you.
What are the next steps for you in your agency? And how many athletes do you have right now?
So right now we've got 3 players that are currently in the NFL. We've got 3 guys in this year's draft class that we're really excited about. We've got a couple players that are in the UFL, XFL area. We actually this year, I guess last year, brought on our first women's soccer player as a client. We did her NIL work, and now she's playing in the NWSL as a professional women's soccer player. Very excited to be doing her endorsements and marketing opportunities and things like that. So we're really kind of hitting the ground running and growing at a great pace right now. Very excited about it. We're bringing on new agents, new interns. We've got a great little team that we're working with right now. And really, it's, like I said, it's just kind of growing and spreading our services to make sure that we can help as many people as we can. One thing I've always said is I'm not going to ever sign too many clients to where I can't provide the best service that they need. And I told everyone, I said, if it ever gets to that point, then we're bringing in more agents, because I'm not going to sell you this bill of goods and tell you that I'm here for you whenever I need. Another thing I always say is the best ability is availability. And if I can't be available for you, then I'm not doing my job as an agent. So we're really hitting that point in a great, methodical way with our kind of guys, our core culture people, and doing things that we think really help out our players and are looking out for their best interests.
Yeah, no, I love that. I feel like, there's value in kind of the boutique agencies nowadays, because all these major sports agencies, they're huge, and there's 1,000 agents that represent them, and that works for some people, but other athletes might want people that that they're gonna put them first and that are always gonna have their best interest, and always can hit up and trust and text at the middle of the night and all that kind of stuff. So there's definitely value in quality over quantity, I will say. Well, it's that time in our episode where we're doing our insider secret. Now, our insider secret is something that we introduced back in season 1. In season 2, we just kind of ramped it up and we're introducing it again. And so I'm really excited to kind of hear Alex's insider secret. Again, this is a moment. It can be a story that you never told, about your experience in the industry, one of the athletes you work with. It can be a tip, it can be a piece of advice, anything like that. But Alex, what is your insider secret?
Oh, this is fun. Well, I mean, there's a lot of secrets in the NFL agent industry, and
Oh yeah.
I gotta be careful. You can't be putting me on blast, otherwise they don't invite me to the next secret agents meeting, right? No, I would say I don't know. Where do you want me to go with this? What kind of
you can share a story, maybe about a crazy story working with one of the athletes. It can be a piece of advice for people that want to become sports agents, that that you would probably maybe tell yourself a couple years ago that you wish you would have known.
well, let me do 2, because one's a little. I got a funny story that's a little short, but and then I do have some advice for people that want to be agents and work in this space. But this is just always makes me laugh. There was one of my clients was playing in one of the collegiate all-star games last January. So basically, once you finish the regular season, there's a all-star game circuit where all the draft eligible prospects, I kind of call it the coming out party. the Senior Bowl is one of the big ones, the East West Shrine Bowl. It's kind of your opportunity to play in an all-star game with the other draft candidates and let scouts evaluate you on that circuit. Um, there's one that was Dallas, and it was kind of a last minute deal where the client and I kind of got connected late. We signed, wanted to work together. And then the second I got him signed, I got him into this all-star game and was able to get him there. But the game started, I think, or the practices started, that after, and we didn't have any of his gear. Like, he was playing at a different school, didn't have any equipment for him. Like, we need to figure some stuff out. He was able to find a helmet. He had his cleats. And the one thing we couldn't find was shoulder pads. And so I'm calling like high schools, like trying to get shoulder pads from some high schools. Like, can we borrow a pair of shoulder pads? Like, we need to go to this practice. And it just so happened there's also like a big ice storm in Dallas that weekend because it's Dallas, and why not? So we're struggling. Finally, like, I wait till the roads clear up and I drive to Dick's Sporting Goods, and I'm sitting there in like the equipment aisle trying on shoulder pads for my client, like trying to figure out, he's a wide receiver. I'm clearly not like a wide receiver build, but I'm just trying on different size shoulder pads. Like, what do you think? And I'm just taking selfies, like sending him to him. Like, what do you think? What do you think about this or that? So sure enough, I was like, this will have to do. Like, we'll find something else. But practice is starting. I think practice was starting in like 2 or 3 hours. So I was like, okay, I'm just and going. And so I literally had to buy him a pair of shoulder pads at Dick's Sporting Goods and drive him up to the practice so that he can go. And then like, and one of the sports reporters that was there, like, wrote an article, and he was like one of the standouts at that practice that day, and like one of the top performers. So it's a weird job, and it's things that you don't expect that you have to do. Take up way more time in this job than the things you expect to have to do. So that was kind of a funny story that I'll never forget.
No, that's awesome. And the fact that the athlete, was a standout, it made it all worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I'll say, just like you said, kind of advice, insider secrets or things. I think there's a lot of people that are passionate about sports and want to be involved in the industry and may want to be agents representing players. But one thing I always say is that when you take this line of work and this becomes your job, you've got to realize that you're not a fan anymore. You're not like cheering for sports. You are working on sports days. So if you like sports and like going to football games because you like tailgating and cheering for your team and doing this and doing that, then make sure that this is the right line of work for you, because our game days are not the fans' game day. We are working. We are, calling, checking in on our guys, making sure everything's okay. It's different for everybody, but like, realize that just because you become an agent doesn't mean that you get to be a free football fan. And if that's something that you're not willing to sacrifice and you enjoy sitting on your couch and watching these games, then maybe it's not the right line of work for you.
I love it. That's actually a really good point, because I feel like a lot of times us as fans of the game can hinder us when you're working in sports, because you view certain things in a different way that sometimes isn't necessarily reality. And you can kind of be a little biased and a little bit washed. So I love that piece of advice. That was awesome. I also love your story. That's honestly hilarious. I feel like that's very unique to you and what you do. So thank you for sharing. And thank you for being on BTS. This was awesome. How can we find you? Are you on socials? How can we support your agency? Give me all the good stuff.
We're pretty much everywhere but TikTok, and that's just the old man in me that not willing to move into the TikTok world. But Ajax Sports Agency, you can find us on Twitter, Instagram. We probably have a Facebook. I don't know. But yeah, you look for us using the tag Ajax Sports Agency. I'm Alex Campbell, and thanks so much for having us on today. It's been a great time, and love talking with you about all this.
Yeah, seriously, guys, make sure you tap in with Alex and his agency. Not only if you're interested in getting a part of a sports agents or your athlete looking for representation, Alex is just also a really cool guy. So make sure you tap in, make sure you log in. Again, thank you so much, Alex, for being on the show. It was a great time.
Thanks for having me. Good talking with you.
What another fantastic episode, Alex. I can't thank you enough for coming on to BTS and telling us about your story and your journey and what you do and how you're helping athletes and giving us, honestly, a very refreshing take on a lot of different things as, we as fans or we on the outside or we as media, heck, even me, can learn from and can get a different perspective on. So I really appreciate you educating us on your work and your industry. Make sure you're following me at Giovanna Scroggins on, I mean, you don't have to follow me, but like you can. But you can follow me at Giovanna Scroggins on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all of the above. And then, of course, you got to support the show. So you can follow Behind the Sports Show on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, as well at Behind the Sport Show. Thank you so much for supporting this podcast. It is truly a passion of mine. I am so thankful that I can have these conversations with people that I know, people that I meet on social media, and just all around the world that are involved in the sports industry and bring them on the cast and have a conversation with them. It is truly the coolest thing ever. So thank y'all for supporting those that do support and those that do watch and listen. I love y'all. I appreciate y'all. And as always, keep supporting and keep being curious about what happens behind the sports. See y'all next time, next Tuesday, right back here, 5 o'clock Central time, every single Tuesday. All right, bye.